It's finally warmed up to be a bit above zero, like 1 degree above zero, out here in southeastern Ontario on the St. Lawrence River. And I'll tell you, it's welcome because it's been so cold here. I'm burning through my firewood like you have no idea. And I'm definitely going to run out before winter's over. From Canada, it's the Cannabis Goldsmith, a show about art and design in all its forms. I'm Alex D., a photographer, a writer, a jewelry designer here in southeastern Ontario, Canada. We need art now more than ever, and the Cannabis Goldsmith is here every Wednesday to bring it. I had a couple of revelations this week. Big revelations. One was nature-based, and the other was kind of an internal reframing. You know, you get these moments in your life where you thought you knew something, and then it turns out you didn't. It wasn't like that, actually. You were thinking about it differently all along, and then suddenly you see it as it is, and then you go, oh. Well, that reframe, it changes the meaning of everything. You probably don't understand what I'm talking about. But let me give you an illustration. I've had this earworm, this song in my head from the 80s from a Canadian band. Okay, I'm not going to say the band because I might try to license the song for the documentary film that's coming up. But anyway, it's an 80s song. And it struck me as I've heard this song in my head before. You know, the earworms, these songs, these tunes that get stuck in your head that you can't seem to get rid of. You keep playing over and over in your brain. And there's a reason for that, is that you're meant to pay attention to them, I think. This song I was listening to over and over, and it has some lyrics in it. I related these lyrics to, the lyrics I remembered, to a time in my life in the 80s when I was DJing, I was at the peak of my DJ career. This was probably around 84 or something like this. And I was a mess. I was totally drinking way too much. I was a disaster. And I was a total disaster. And the lyrics in this song that I sung in my head for years, you know, every so often it'll come up in the brainworm lineup. And, you know, I thought the lyrics reflected that experience of mine back in the day, this day of being on the verge of living on the street, living on couches, basically, to play records, you know, spending every cent I had on records and booze. Just not a healthy lifestyle. The records are a healthy lifestyle, but not the booze. But anyway, this was like this was a mess. Anyway, these lyrics were symbolic about that time in my life where I was a disaster as a young man and trying to find my way and trying to find my way as a DJ and find my way as in life, having no idea about anything at all, but thinking I did. And this is how youth are, right? Young people are like that. This is their strength. They have the internal limitations, the internal speed governor is sometimes missing, is often missing from youth. And this gives them the energy to move forward and discover things. And anyway, back to the story. So I would have this earworm, this tune, this 80s tune that brought me right back to that time. You know, and it's great in the future when you look back because you're not there. You can look at it as a memory, right? It was painful at the time for me, I believe. Anyway, I started thinking about this band. Maybe this earworm that's going through my head is something I should pay attention to. So I started doing research to see if I could license this particular track since it's Canadian music, and I'm producing this documentary film about electronic music in Canada. And this is essentially where I started. And the movie's not about me, by the way. It's about the rave scene in Canada, about the house music scene. But it has to start somewhere. And I thought, you know, this might be a good track for it to start as the movie starts, right? So then I started doing research on this band. and I did a search for the lyrics. And it turns out the lyrics that I've been telling myself in my brain since 1984 or whatever were not actually the lyrics of the song. The song said something else entirely. But here I had formatted my memory and life around how I thought the lyrics in this song summed up the experience of this part of my life so perfectly. It turns out that the actual lyrics are different. Completely different, that I had just imagined. You know how sometimes popular music, you think the lyrics are saying one thing, but when you look, there actually says something else. Well, this is the case with this memory and the earworm. And here I would trot this song out as an earworm every time I wanted to perhaps feel how the starving artistness of me from the 80s to justify myself in some way or whatever, or just to reach back into time or whatever. Turns out the lyrics were different in the actual song, and they have nothing to do with my experience that I remembered of the song. And I was like, oh, okay. Now, what this means is that the meaning of art changes over time. That meanings of art can be incredibly fluid, and they're different for each person. The dudes who wrote this, there's the Canadian band who produced and wrote and performed this track, this music that I liked so much, the tune and the lyric. That was all imagined. The lyrics were imagined. The tune I know is real, and I can hear that, and I love the music aspect. But the lyrics were something I just overlaid on top, just to maybe incorporate the music better into my life or whatever. But you see, meanings of art change over time, and art is different for everybody. This is why I smile often when I go to a museum on the rare occasion or a gallery and I see a little card next to a painting saying the artist wanted to do this and that with this painting. He wanted to depict, the blue sky represents this and that this represents that. How do they know? And even so, if the artist meant that the blue sky represented freedom, somebody else might see it differently, and then incorporate it into their life for 30 years and suddenly decide that, and suddenly realize that no, the artist meant something else with it. Like, what are you supposed to do with that information? Are you supposed to disregard the meanings you've attributed to the art? Or are you supposed to take some gallerist's opinion about what the art means? Or if the artist is alive, are you going to take their word for it? Now, I think that the artist creates the piece, whatever it is, the music, the podcast, the photograph, the jewelry piece, the painting, the sculpture, the ceramic bowl, the flower arrangement, the garden, the paint job on the car, the vintage car restoration. All this stuff changes. The meaning of it changes over time. And the artist has no control over it once he sets it free, or once he creates the art and displays it. Now, even if the gallerist puts the little card next to the painting explaining that the blue means indigenous happiness or whatever, it might mean something else entirely to the viewer, who will take that home with him and say, man, that blue is just like, makes me feel happy inside. Or that blue gives me the sense that, sadness is only temporary. Like, who knows what people internalize about art? Like me with the lyrics, like you with your lyrics. You're thinking, oh, this song I loved since I was a little girl or a little boy, some kid or whatever, sitting there listening to music, and it comes back to you, and it contextualizes your early life or whatever. Just do a search for the lyrics and see if you're getting the lyrics right before you put too much weight into that. But I'm thinking, you put weight into it for so many years anyway. Does it really matter, right? Like, meanings are fluid. Meanings are fluid in art. This is what I'm discovering. So this was a huge discovery, from the earworm to the lyrics to the self-realization that art is fluid. The meanings of art can change over time, and art to one person might mean something else to someone else. It might mean something else to someone else. So anyway, that was one big realization. And then the other one was like, and this is more related to the theme of this podcast today about funding your art. I got up 2 days ago, and I was, I went out and sat on the side deck, and I was enjoying some of my homegrown produce, shall we say. And I looked up at the two big trees, and I saw crows. And there are 3 crows on the property. They live in these big, huge, tall fir trees on the property. I don't know if they're the same family or if they're different families or whatever, but they're a community, right? I see them flying together, but I think they live in separate trees. Anyway, these crows are huge. These are big birds. And what they do is they fly several kilometers up to the Canada's main highway, the 401, and where cars are rushing by at 120 kilometers an hour back and forth. And they hang out at the side of the 401, and they eat the roadkill. And this is why they're so massive. And then they come back at the end of the day, and they nestle into the tops, the crow's nests. This is, like they used to have on the pirate ships. Way up on the top of the highest trees, there's a crow's nest, and that's where they go at the end of the day after eating roadkill all day. Now, this is a kind of, it seems like if you're a crow, this is a good life, because along the river here, it's really beautiful. But in the winter, it's freezing, and it's been very cold for weeks now, colder than normal. And there's snow on the ground. And I'm starting to see predator tracks on the property. I saw coyote tracks, or not wolf tracks, I don't think, but it's fox or coyote. And they're getting hungry, and they're looking for rodents and stuff because it's so cold, right? And the rodents are hiding underground to stay warm. So anyway, I'm seeing tracks. And then I heard the crows going crazy, and I looked up, and this huge bald eagle, huge, I mean, at least 4 times as big as a crow, like bigger even than that. And it just kind of like just gently landed at the top of one of the tallest trees on my property that doesn't have any leaves on it now because it's winter. So I'm like, the tree's 100 feet, over 100 feet tall probably. So I'm like 100 feet away from this bird. That's how close I am to it. I'm looking at this thing, enormous. I've never seen a bald eagle in my life. And in real, I've seen them on TV or on pictures or whatever, but you don't get the size of these things. They're huge, right? So this bald eagle is flying in, and just the flying skill's incredible, right? Just like gently drops onto this branch and starts preening. And the crows are freaking out, like they're dive bombing it. They're cawing, and they're circling around it. And one even, perched on a branch across from it and was like cawing, like 6 feet away from this thing on a different branch. And cawing, and like this eagle is a scary looking creature. And it was there and it was preening. It was like, sorting out its feathers. It's like -10 out. I guess it wants to separate the feathers to get more like air or something, insulation value. And it just perched there and was preening. And these crows were like freaking out, and it paid absolutely no attention to the crows. None whatsoever. And eventually the crows gave up and went away. And this bird was there for a long time. And I watched it as it was up there, this bald eagle. And I was thinking, wow. It was just kind of an awe-inspiring thing. Like, you often see them. Sometimes you'll see them driving along the Trans-Canada Highway, the 401. You look up, you see this predator bird in the sky, like far away, like a kilometer up in the air. circling around or whatever. You have no idea what it is. You can't see because it's so far away, right? And you have no idea how big these things are. But anyway, this bird was there. This bald eagle was there, sorting out its plumage in the tree. And the crows were not too happy. And they went back to their own purchase, and you could hear them cawing unhappily. It's like, because this thing just didn't care, right? It just sat there and in the highest tree and was just preening. So I thought, I got to get a camera. I got to get I got a 300 millimeter big game Nikon lens here that I used to in Africa to photograph elephants and giraffes and stuff. So I was thinking, I got to go get the lens and take a picture of this bird, because nobody will believe me anyway, right? Or I won't even believe me, because anyway. So I went in, and by the time I got the lens, it was gone. So I thought, wow, well, at least I saw it, and there might be something to learn from the experience. But my thinking started turning towards funding, strangely enough. Funding the art projects that I'm working on now. I'm digitizing a massive collection of slides and negatives, film photography, from my work publishing Tribe magazine as a young man. And all this is film and slides that has to be digitized and categorized. Huge project, massive project. Slow, painstaking, careful work, right? And I'm like doing it. I'm trying. The reason why it's slow, painstakingly careful work is that I want to make the scans and the digitizations as accurate and as clear as to how they looked when I shot them 30 years ago. So I want to make them as good as can be. You often see old photos on your Facebook feed or on the internet, and they kind of look yellowed or blue or some weird color to them. They're out of focus, or they look weird, like they look like old, right? But they don't have to look that way if they're digitized properly. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm restoring, I'm digitizing, I'm doing all this work, right? But after I saw the eagle sorting out his feathers, is there preening? And I was thinking, this isn't a political symbol. This is like, he's on the Canadian side here. He's like, I was trying to think a little bit about the eagle, but my brain started turning to funding. And how am I gonna fund the book that I'm producing? How am I gonna fund the documentary film that I'm producing out of all these photos? I've already collected money from the community to buy the gear necessary to digitize the work. I'm doing all the work myself. I'm not charging for the work, but I still going to need money to license music for the film. I'm going to need money to produce a book, to actually print the book, So how am I going to get funding to do all this? So I thought, maybe I should do a series of podcasts about how to fund, how I'm going to fund this as I do it. So it might be instructive for you, the artist who is trying to get funding for your project. It might inspire you, but it'll also be journalism to show how this is done in Canada, how an artist can get funding or get funding denied in Canada for a worthwhile project. So it'll be it'll be a journalism piece, it'll be a documentary piece, it'll be a funding, trying to get funding piece, for this incredible project that I'm working on. Now, funding your art, part 1. Getting your ideas sorted out. Sorting out what you want to do. Before you do anything, it helps to sit on the branch and kind of preen and kind of sit up there in the branch, high up in the air, removed from the ground for a second. So your aspect, you have a view, a drone view, better than a drone view actually. You can see everything from up there. So I was thinking maybe that's what the eagle meant. But the very next day, I went out And I saw it again in another tree. This giant eagle came back and landed at the top of one of these fir trees where the crow's nests, where one of the crow's nests is. Now, the crows were out eating roadkill because I didn't hear them cawing and they weren't freaking out or anything, so they weren't around. They were gone. And this eagle landed in one of the nests. And I'm wondering, has he gone to eat their young, or what has he gone? Or is he just resting, or just doing it to show he could do it, or whatever? Because generally, from what I observed yesterday, he really didn't give a hoot about these crows. But perhaps he was just using it as a crow's nest, as a vantage point to see what the hell's going on. So I thought, wow, I've seen this bird twice now, so it must mean something. It must be symbolic. Here, I'm an artist. I have to really figure out what this means, right? Shouldn't I? So immediately, I have some idea what tarot cards mean. So I was like, okay, what's the tarot symbolism around eagles, bald eagles, or birds of prey, or this kind of thing. And there's some very King of Swords energy about this bald eagle. Now, the King of Swords is a card about clear thinking, clear blue skies, and the king is sitting there in a throne. He's got a sword in his hand, and there's like a bird in the distance in a lot of the tarot cards, and it's the bald eagle flying around in the air up there. And it represents clear analytical thinking about a situation, or about a life, or about a circumstance, or about a project, or any of that. It represents separating yourself out from the ground just for a moment to get up in the tree and have a look around and get aspect, get viewpoints from another perspective. I had a therapist once a friend, she was a therapist, and she had this thing where she would get everyone in a group therapy session to stand up on their chairs and look at how you're just doing that simple thing of raising your aspect, your view, your perspective up, 2 feet into the air changes everything. You can see things differently from above. This was a simple illustration of how separating yourself out from the ground for a second, where you can see a different view and perspective about stuff. Now, us artists know how to do this. Generally, we do it unconsciously. We do it without thinking. But here we must think about it. And clear thinking is what this bird means, this giant bald eagle. It doesn't mean politics. It doesn't mean anything. For me, anyway, in these two instances, it was like, okay, I have to really think about how I'm going to do this project and how I'm going to fund it. And then the ideas started coming to me. It's like, okay, I'm going to document the funding process in the podcast. I'm going to document the funding process, maybe even in the documentary itself. I'm going to talk about how the community is supporting this preservation project of the slides and photographs of Canada's rave scene and electronic music culture, how I'm trying to restore it, how the Toronto Archives has agreed to accept the collection in my estate to incorporate it into the Toronto Archives. It's going to become a part of their collection after I'm gone. So there's all this evidence of community support, community engagement for it, and engagement at the highest level from an archival, one of Canada's top archival institutes. So there we go. So I'm building my thinking. My clear thinking was, okay, I've got all these things, these pieces together. Let's put them together, and maybe if I can get some funding, I'll be able to get music for the documentary film. So all this thinking started coming together, and after I saw this bald eagle and the crows and all this stuff, and it had some kind of symbolic reframing effect on my brain, in the same way that realizing that the lyrics that I had understood to be a certain way were completely not that case. like 30 years later. And then I had a reframing about that. But the eagle reframed some stuff about ideas for me, the clear thinking. It's like, don't get distracted by the crows. Just you sit there and like just think for a moment and how you can fund your project. Think for a moment how you can make it happen. Because you're not seeking funding for the money, you're seeking funding for the art. And this is going to present problems, I think, for me, because these things are at ends. They are at cross purposes sometimes, and especially government funding. Like I've talked about it here in Canada, we have apparently we have layers of control, government. There's lots of controls on funding for arts in Canada, and I'm hoping they won't thwart my desire to put out a documentary film about the birth of electronic music in Canada. But I'm hoping I don't cause the problem. All this thinking was coming to me. I was thinking, a lot of times I'm confrontational with this, so I'm going to have to with these government people who seem to be not doing their jobs properly. Now, aren't we all, right? But when it comes to funding, will I have to pretend in order to get the funding, or can I be prickly and still get the funding? So these are all these these are these things that I'm going to cover. Granted, I'll have to be diplomatic in order to get any funding, but I don't think I'm going to, and neither should you, change your moral code or change your art to suit government funding. Never do that, ever, ever, ever. And an artist would never do that anyway. But there's pressure to do it, I think. We'll find all this out when I talk about it. So this is the first episode of Funding Your Art. This is getting your ideas together. Figure out, just get the lay of the land. Go up in the tree, look over your whole art, what you're producing, where you think it might go, who you think might buy it. Even if you're not selling art, if you're giving it away, who deserves to see it and get it? Think about that. Think about it from a different perspective. Now, if you can't get up on a tree, stand up on a chair in your living room and start thinking about it from up there. Look around your space. Get a different perspective. Think about it. Do some clear thinking about what you want to fund, not how you're going to do it, but what. And then the ideas will start coming to you. So, those two major symbolic things that happened to me, the reframing of the music lyrics and the bald eagle. I haven't seen them since, but I did a little bit of research on them, and it turns out they're quite common along the river here. And in fact, they love this part of the river here, the St. Lawrence River here in southeastern Ontario, because they can eat fish year-round. There's these ice shelves that develop on the river when the river freezes and then ice sheets are pushed up against the shore. They stand on the edge of the ice sheet and fish. They'll fish right out of the water. They also hunt rodents from the air, rabbits, dogs. I'm sure this thing could pick up a dog or a cat easily and just vanish into the sky with it. I learned that they can have a 7-foot wingspan, and this one was huge, so easily that big. An adult bald eagle, white head, really white, and really contrasting feather colors, just beautiful, incredibly beautiful animal, just terrific. So it turns out they love this area. They hunt up and down the river. Their range, like inland, their range would be kind of circular, I guess. They'd hunt a wider area, but here they hunt linearly along the river, like right along the river. Their ranges are sort of right along the river. And he must live nearby because he's been here twice. And this is what the AIs are telling me anyway. They're saying that if he's comfortable enough to sit up in the tree and preen, and when you're there in the yard looking at him, then he must live in the area. So I'm really quite pleased with that. I am very happy with that. Finding Your Art 101. The first thing you have to do before you do anything is get up in the tree. Get up on a chair and get a different perspective on what you need the money for, what you're going to do with it. Don't think about how to get it yet, but we'll talk about that in another episode. We're going to talk about finding your art through advertising, finding your art through grants, finding your art through sales. I'm going to talk about different ways that artists can secure funding for making their art. And it's hard. It's not just like a widget, selling a widget, because a widget is a widget. 30 years from now, the widget is still is probably in a landfill. But if it isn't, it's still a widget. But art can change. When you buy the art 30 years ago, the album, it turns out it means something else 30 years later. Now, that adds another dimension to funding art. That's the show this week. I hope I haven't sent you all in a spin over this, but whatever. Today I'm going back into the digitization room. I am going to keep digitizing slides. I'm making slight modifications to the setup that is holding my camera above the light source. What I'm doing is just essentially rephotographing each slide with a super high resolution camera and correcting all the images as I go. Very slow work. The slowest part is documenting it, cataloging it, what year it was shot and where it was shot, if I can do that, and what events they were shot at, if I can do that. I'm not identifying people in the images. So it is just like these are, unless they were identified in the magazine, in the publication itself. I've got the magazines, the Tribe magazines I published, to go back and cross-match to see if I can get dates and stuff properly. So this is all taking time, right? It's slow, but it's coming together. And I'm looking to have a book out at the end, first book out at the end of 2026 on photography from Tribe, the magazine that covered DJ culture and electronic music in Canada in the 90s. This is going to be so good. Anyway, last thing about the American situation. It turns out the states, the northern states on our border, are getting 40% less Canadians visiting, and they're not happy about it. And they're wondering why we're not coming. Well, they know why we're not coming now, I think. It's starting to dawn on them why we're not coming. But here's the thing. We've had over 200 Canadians arrested crossing the border. We've had children arrested, separated from their families. Some have been sent to internment. Canadians. Seniors are being fingerprinted at the border and treated like scum at the border. This is why Canadians are not going into the United States anymore. Why? Why would we? Hey? Why would we? And I'm sure this FIFA thing, whatever it is, the soccer tournament, each day they're blocking like 20 nations from entering the U.S. So I'm sure that's going to be just fabulous for them down there when people are getting sent to internment camps when they show up at the border with their soccer tickets. Now, this is what's next to us, This is what's next to us, and this is why we're not going to the United States anymore. Why? Why would anyone want to? Why would anyone want to? And the people in the northern, right next to us, they're starting to realize this now. They thought, they took it for granted that we were coming to see them, and they thought we would still come down there in spite of being insulted by their government and just disrespected by the U.S. government, and having our senior citizens fingerprinted at the border when they're going down to their own properties that they own in Florida? All right. Yeah, I think it's starting to dawn on them now. What at first they thought it would be it's taken them 10 months or whatever to decide whether to take the government literally or figuratively. Now this is them, right? Okay. Granted, huge populations are not the smartest knives in the drawer. I mean, our population isn't either, if you take us as a whole, right? We're not the rocket scientists. Neither are they. But, I mean, the evidence is piling up that something is seriously wrong with their government there. And anyway, we are not going to be treated like scum, all right? We're Canadian. We don't need to be treated like that. They expect to treat us like scum and then visit the United States to spend our money. Does that make sense to you? No. No. And why should it, really? Anyway, that's it for the show this week. The Cannabis Goldsmith is produced by Tribe Communications, Inc. in the Thousand Islands area of Ontario, Canada. We recorded in our studio in southeastern Ontario along the St. Lawrence River, where we can see America across the river. Subscribe to the Cannabis Goldsmith wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the show and tell your fellow artist friends about it. It's the only artist podcast coming to you right from a studio every Wednesday morning. We'll see you next week on the Cannabis Goldsmith. Oh, if you want to reach me, send me an email, alexd@cannabisgoldsmith.com. Thanks for listening.